we'll just jump into it with Maruf. So we have him here. And, I think the easiest thing to do is basically kind of just start us off with telling us a little bit about yourself, what you currently do, and a little bit about your background as well.
Well, I just want to say thank you for having me on today. I'm Maruf. I'm a third-year student at Drexel University. I say third year because Drexel is a bit weird. We have a 5-year program, so I'm considered a pre-junior. So I'm studying marketing, analytics, and tech innovation management. And all those majors kind of led to me going for corporate innovation and kind of finding my internship and my experience in that realm. Most of my interests have always been in like sustainability or environmental things. So when I was first looking for like my internships or my co-ops, I was always geared towards that way. And how I kind of shaped my experience was I wanted to work for a startup at first to kind of understand from the ground up how everything works, and then kind of work my way up. So my background is actually in photography and film, which then led me to kind of think about ideas like startup ideas that I wanted to have or startup companies that I wanted to kind of create. And one of them that I had was 3 years ago was to make a platform to connect influencers to different companies. So it's easier way to kind of communicate and get a hold of them for their marketing campaigns. So I was doing a startup pitch in this one competition at Drexel. And the director of innovation at Exelon was one of the judges, and he kind of asked me to come on his startup and work for him. So I ended up taking that opportunity and working for that company, and it was called EZ, and it was actually in the sustainability realm. They were kind of trying to educate people on electric vehicles, infrastructure, and kind of transition most individuals who are so used to using gas cars, they don't truly understand how this new EV world is working. So we were educating them, and we were kind of helping this transition with dealerships to get them the customers to get them the right customers that are educated, because they were having a hard time moving a lot of these vehicles that were just sitting in their lots. So most of my experience has been in sustainability and the environmental world. And leading from kind of going off of that, that led me to work on this other app. It's called EcoCred. And EcoCred kind of helps people also live a more sustainable lifestyle. So like most of my interests and passions have always been in that realm. So I always kind of focus that way.
Wow. All right. So yeah, that's definitely a lot to unpack, and some amazing stuff you've already mentioned. So actually, one more thing before we kind of dive further into the conversation, I'll say I've seen some more people join. We do want to open it up to Q&A for the viewers here. So if you guys have any questions at any point, feel free to just put them in the chat box, and then towards the end of the meeting, we'll start going through some of those. But just at any point, just feel free to add those to the chat. But yeah, so Maruf, that's some really cool stuff. That's awesome. And I think it might be a little bit more helpful to kind of explain maybe how Drexel works, like kind of what you were saying a few minutes ago to me about, how co-ops work and how that kind of operates for kind of your position and lifestyle. And then also maybe even touch a little bit further on your background on the film and photography and how that, stem further into, it sounded like almost 2 different startups and maybe where those kind of ended up going. So maybe even cover a little bit of that stuff.
Yeah, man. So for Drexel specifically, before I was choosing a college, I always kind of wanted to start my own thing, and I was seeing like college as almost like a barrier, or like I was like, oh, I don't have to go to school. But that obviously that mindset kind of changes as you get older and more mature. So as I came closer to kind of choosing a college, I chose Drexel because I looked at the fact that you're getting like real world experience, and you can kind of make connections that other people are not able to while they're in college. So there was an option for a 4-year and a 5-year. So the 4-year, you get 1 co-op, which is just 1 6-month experience with the company. And then for the 5-year, you get 3 co-ops. So you have 3 different companies that you can potentially work for. So I went with the 5-year, and what happens with Drexel is your first year, you go through you just go through 9 months of classes, and then you have a summer vacation. But then the next 4 years that you do school, you actually have no summers. So how it works is you do 2 quarters of school and then 2 quarters of co-ops. So my first year around, I basically went with a startup just so I can kind of get a grasp for co-op. And that kind of led with, or I kind of picked that because it was a content creation position. And so my background in photography and film and kind of working with like almost like freelancing for various companies throughout the years in high school. Towards the end, actually, 12th grade, freshman year, I was freelancing, and that kind of helped me kind of build up my portfolio overall. So when I was initially picking for co-ops, I was like, maybe I'll stick with my passion and go that way. And also, if I started liking the startup world in general, so I was like, if I work for a startup and also kind of do what I like doing and what I'm good at, it'll kind of help me just be engaged and kind of provide actual value. So when I hopped on EZV, that was the company, that was the first startup. I basically created content for them and did different marketing campaigns. And also I worked closely. I was like the intern of like the main founder and CEO of the company. So I worked right under him, and I kind of saw how he kind of managed the company, how he had to wear all these different hats. Sorry about that. Um,
No worries.
yeah, but he had to wear multiple different hats, and I was seeing how him, even as in such a high position, was the one kind of selling the company, was kind of doing all these different things that I actually never expected the CEO to be doing. So I don't know, it was really cool to kind of go from literally just taking photos and making videos to then kind of ending up in a startup and using that as a way, or like that to leverage to getting into it and then learning so much after.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying. That's a great point. So that kind of leads into what I wanted to ask next, almost about, your unique experience kind of doing both sides of things, between trying to do things on your own, having experience with that, and then going to work for, a Fortune 100 company. And, how did those kind of differ in terms of innovation and how they kind of operate? Because doing things on your own can be a little bit different. And then, working for a company can seem maybe overwhelming at first, but clearly doing all this kind of innovation. How do they kind of differ, and what might be some of the similarities between that?
Yeah, man. So I personally think the process that you pretty much go through as someone that's kind of lone wolf, like by yourself, you're trying to start your own thing, is pretty similar to the process we go through within the corporation. But I believe that within a corporation, you kind of have this safety net built for you. So whereas like if you fail, for example, one of our startups like are running out of money, we can easily go to our board of directors, or the board that kind of funds a lot of our startups, and kind of pinpoint, oh, this is what we think is wrong, this is where we need the money, and usually it gets approved. But the thing is, what I've noticed is a lot of my friends that try to start startups outside of this like corporate realm, they don't have that safety net. They have to move very quickly, or they have to be very careful with the decisions and the strategies they're creating. So within the corporation, you're kind of also really well connected. So for example, recently we're trying to start a new startup within the mobility industry. So that includes electric vehicles, electric vehicle infrastructure. For example, you're seeing scooters everywhere. You're seeing scooters when you go to LA, or you're going to Maryland, you're seeing scooters in Baltimore. So we were like, these guys were ideating, and they were trying to create a big garage to house them and also charge them, and then basically deploy them or back again. So for example, that specific idea, when they first started it, we had connections within the corporation with like Bird and a lot of the larger companies like Lyft. They have scooters. So it was very easy to get connected with the actual individuals that are kind of running these little startups, or not little anymore, but these startups or companies, and get in almost like really good insight. So you have like information that you wouldn't potentially have if you were by yourself, because those connections aren't as strong as you would if you were a big company. So the connections definitely help. And also the fact that there's a lot of like, it's easier to get funding when you're in a company, because it's just like, the individuals, those are you work with them. So it's easier to explain your ideas. It's easier to present them. You feel more comfortable. Whereas outside, you're going to all these different venture companies and asking for money, and really trying to, I don't know, like tell your story to make them understand. So yeah, it's definitely easier to, I guess, go through the process. It's much faster within a corporation if you're using the same type of process than if you would be outside.
Sure. Yeah, I see what you're saying. That's
Yeah.
That's another interesting point that I feel like doesn't get explained too often. And you having the experience with both, I think, makes a very good distinction between that, and it's definitely really cool. So, sort of follow up question. I'm sure it might have changed several times for you at this point, but do you have a preference at this point? What you kind of prefer right now in terms of, um, you know, something on your own versus, corporate innovation?
Well, I feel like after working for the past 1.5 years, I kind of, at first, when I was trying to start my ideas, I was very like, oh, this is my passion and I want to go for it. I'm going to make it and it's a great idea. It's going to work. But like now, I think I take a more rational approach and I try to think more strategically. So for example, like I think about how can I create a really quick, like minimum viable product, like MVP, and put it out and just like test it first and then go for the actual thing. So a lot of that. So like for me specifically, I don't mind like working in corporate innovation for first few like years after college. I think it's totally fine. I think the connections that I'm making are really good for like when I do want to start my own thing. I think relationships are really important when it comes to starting anything. And you may have like the best idea in the world. That's what I learned. But the thing is, if you don't know the right people within the business world to kind of get it up and running, it's really hard to get anywhere. And so I think personally, I'm going to stay within the corporate realm for a few years after college just to create the right relationships, find really what my passion is and where I want to kind of go and have that right idea and completely like learn the process of how they're like every year pumping out all these different businesses and, shutting them down, starting new ones. And then I don't know, like getting to that level where I fully understand it from just being in a startup to how different startups are operating in all these different markets. So I think to have a um, well-rounded experience for the startup world, I kind of want to stay in the corporate innovation world and then kind of start my own thing later down the line. Whereas it was very different before I had this experience at all. So
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's yeah. Another great point. And another follow up for, I guess, your current role is kind of about, based on what you've seen so far and based on all the things that, Exelon does, how have they, stayed focused on innovation? Because I know you said you kind of talked about, going to different, people within the organization or going to the board, for different reasons. But with all the things going on in such a large company, how do they really stay focused on, the task at hand?
yeah, so I mean, Exelon in general is, I don't know if you guys know, but it's a big energy generation company. They focus on nuclear, hydro, wind. And cool thing is, my group actually does none of that. Like we just don't deal with it. And what we do is specifically, it's like a group of about 20 people. And we try to think about what the company is going to look like in like 10, 20, 30 years. So they kind of isolated a group of individuals to kind of always be thinking about innovation rather than what the rest of the company is currently doing. So the team is really a team of misfits. Like I'm talking about, we have individuals that came from like NASA, different venture companies, and like we basically all come together and we have these like ideation sessions every 2 weeks, I believe. And in these like roundtable sessions, we ideate on different business opportunity areas. So we look at, so we have like I believe seven or eight business opportunity areas right now. And to give you like two examples, one of them is sustainable communities, and the other one is, I already talked about it, like mobility. So we would then, after we ideate on these specific areas, we would take these ideas and kind of find evidence and do research, obviously, like you would in any startup. And these individuals kind of carry out these tasks. So after like kind of isolating these group of individuals that are really passionate and very entrepreneurial, and kind of looking for them also throughout the company itself, not just externally, the company kind of created this group called the Accelerate Growth Group, and they go through this entire process to kind of keep their entire focus on innovation rather than what the company is doing. So I think that's why Exelon is very successful at like the businesses that they're creating. Because my time there just alone, I think almost 3 businesses were started, and they were so clearly like it's working.
Right.
So
Yeah, sure. Sure. Now,
yeah.
what about in terms of kind of collaboration moving outside of that group that you operate with? how does that work in terms of getting to different departments or different people that you would need to kind of help facilitate what you guys are doing?
Yeah, so what I noticed is, so for the past 6 months, on the internal team of the incubator, I've noticed that a lot of the times we bring in consulting groups, we bring in different agencies. So most of the time we're not actually doing the work. It's almost like we are creating a strategy, creating a process, or kind of talking about who do we bring in to kind of work in this space. So if you think about it, we are energy providers, but that doesn't necessarily make us experts on electric vehicles at all. We don't. So what we initially did was to create businesses around that. So we have this one business called Steer, and Steer does electric vehicle subscription service. So what you do is you would pay a certain amount a month, anywhere from, I believe, $900 to $1,600. And by the way, it is like a higher end service right now because the electric vehicle world in general is not affordable yet. So for example, when we wanted to start that specific business, we bought it. I believe we brought in a consulting company. I'm not sure which one, totally forgot, but they gave us a lot of market research on it. And then we kind of brought in the right people after that specific stage of kind of understanding the market. And then we brought in different groups to kind of help us maneuver through. So a lot of the times we're finding that we're never like the experts in the things that we want to start or the things that may be really good investments. So what we do is we bring in outside companies to kind of educate us, outside individuals to kind of educate us, and then we proceed. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So then I know you've talked about it a little bit, but can you kind of walk us through, some of the things, maybe a little bit more in depth about, what, business opportunities and what kind of products and businesses you have specifically worked on or maybe seen kind of come up, and just talk about how they kind of worked and, what that process looked like.
Yeah. So I worked on 4 projects so far in my time there. And the first one was EZV that I talked about, the education company, and then the second one was Steer, and Steer is a subscription service, and then third is EcoCred, which is the app, and then the last one is my favorite, is ClearSight, and what they do is they take drones and robotics and submersibles, and they do these inspections of like 500 miles of like electric lines, or they'll take it to like Limerick. They'll go to Limerick and like inspect the nuclear sites and all that. So I think wait, I'm sorry. Can you repeat that question one more time? I totally lost my train
Yeah,
of thought.
that was about it. Just kind of summarizing what, what you had specifically worked on, and maybe even talking about how long each of those took. Like you said, you worked on 4 of them. Like how long did it take from maybe the origin of it to, kind of rolling it out take?
Yeah, so most of the businesses that I just took about 1.5 years. So we have this process where it goes through different stages. Initially, like the first stage, people have, like, for example, for the app, and specifically, we wanted to focus on sustainability and helping people transition into a more sustainable lifestyle to kind of combat climate change. So that was like the main idea, but we never had an idea for the app or whatever we were going to create. So we had an ideation session, and we would ideate and create all these ideas. And the second stage, we would knock them down using evidence, because this is not going to work, and then give them actual points of like why this is not going to work. And the third stage, you basically have one single idea that's good. So the third stage, for example, for the app, it was founded about 1.5 years ago. That's when it was in the third stage. And then after that third stage, you ask for investment from my group first. So our team invests anywhere from $5,000 to $40,000 of like really, really low, small investments for the ideas. And then the founders would then go and do market research and try to validate if their ideas are actually going to work. So after that validation process is done, you can then go to the board and ask for a large amount of money to kind of continue with your project. So the board then can approve anywhere from 1 million to, I've seen 6 million recently, for like Series A funding for piloting the actual project. Right. So after the projects are piloted, then you're kind of working. So how we look at it is piloting is external, scaling is after piloting, which is internal. That's how we look at it. So when we're piloting, we're trying to figure out everything external. Like how do we bring in the customers? How can we build like a funnel? And like overall, just like seeing how can we make this a viable business. And then after that entire piloting stage is over, the app didn't make it past the piloting stage yet. Actually, none of our startups have made it past the piloting stage yet. The scale stage, not the piloting stage. So most of the companies are in pilot right now. So the next stage is going to be scaling. And for scaling, we're looking at the drone business to be scaled first, which is going to be scaled most likely in 2 years. And that's the reason because they're still piloting and trying to figure out how they're going to bring in these new customers, because the traditional ways of doing something and then you bringing in this new method of using drones and robotics is kind of sometimes like discouraging for a lot of companies. They're like, oh, like, I don't know if that's going to be as effective as putting up a real guy up there. So we're trying to figure that out. But when it's scaling, we ask for even larger amounts of money, and that's all internal, and internally, like kind of growing the team, bringing in more people, growing your marketing company or marketing department, or just like growing each different section of the company. So overall, I believe the timeline that we give for our startups is mostly 3 to 5 years, and that's obviously like most startups are profitable in like 5 years anyway. So like if you look at it even like externally, so I think it's like overall, if you're looking at most of the startups now, they are all in pilot, and the company usually doesn't mind waiting until it scales, just because they see the potential in it when they're investing all this money, and they put so much money into research before they kind of go into that scaling phase to see if it will actually work. So yeah, so 3 to 5 years is probably when we see a full startup kind of being profitable.
Okay. So now then, how long has, Exelon been doing this type of stuff? Um,
Actually, it's very recent. They started in 2017. That's when the group was formed.
mm,
And so that was like really inspiring to me that from 2017 to now, they already had 9 businesses. And obviously, like
wow.
out of the 9 businesses, 3 of them were shut down just because it wasn't working out. But like 7 of them are still active. And honestly, the businesses specifically, when I look at them, like yes, they are going to make money, but I feel like they're solving a lot of good problems and kind of pushing the world forward. Because so for example, like the app, it's kind of helping a regular person transition into a more sustainable lifestyle. So it's like all positive things. So and then like if you think about the electric vehicles, educating someone to kind of switch to a cleaner way of transportation. Um, for example, and then the drone company, it's kind of saving. So when you're putting up a person on these lines, you're kind of risking their life. There's actually a lot of money that goes into insurance for that person to go up. So you're risking all these actual people's lives, whereas you can put a drone up and kind of accomplish the same thing. So I look at it as like it's like all kind of helping the world and moving it forward in a way. So yeah.
Right. Okay. No, yeah, that's great stuff. So now I kind of want to transition a little bit into more current day about, current situation dealing with, going online for everything we're dealing with due to, COVID-19 and kind of what that looks like. So how has that affected what you've seen so far in your work and, how things are kind of operating in terms of trying to do essentially startup things in terms of innovation and, but doing it digitally?
Yeah, so most of our startups are still fine. So they haven't reported like any struggles. Obviously, everyone's working remote. Everyone's working from home. I know like last month I was in Chicago and Detroit when this whole coronavirus thing started happening. So right after I left, I read the news and there was like 2 people apparently like tested positive at the airport that I was. So like after that, and that kind of went out to the company, and then literally the week after, everyone was all like travel was canceled, all kind of even Amtrak, like local travel from say Delaware to Philly, even that was canceled. So everyone was told to work from home. It hasn't really affected the business side at all because we usually just communicate over Skype anyway. My team is kind of broken up in Chicago, DC, and Maryland. So we would only travel, say, once a month or twice a month to kind of like team meetings in person. So those have been canceled, and our Q1 kind of the growth board meeting that we have to invest or give our startups more money, that's also been canceled because of all this going on. We can't really meet in person anymore. So it slowed down like the investment side of things, or like where we're putting in more money into ideas, but hasn't slowed down like the startups and kind of keep going with with testing and figuring it out, no, not really. It's still working out just fine.
Okay. No, yeah, that's good to hear. So it just sounds like a lot of it was remote kind of to begin with, that
Yeah,
it kind of worked out in that way.
yeah, and it was really cool. I think the director of innovation kind of sent out this message, which I really enjoyed. And he kind of reminded us that in the last recession, so many successful companies, startups came up. So like Instagram, Slack, Venmo, all those were started in '09 and 10. Even Rivian, like the large electric car company, they were started in '09. And and he was just saying like, just because like the world has stopped doesn't mean like your ideas need to stop. You can like keep going. So I thought that was really cool. And that's for like everyone, honestly. Like just because the world has stopped, these guys did it. Instagram was founded in '09, so it's possible.
Exactly. No, 100%. So now shifting a little bit back towards your kind of role as still a student and still doing all this amazing work and working with big companies like this. How has it been kind of balancing being a student and doing all this work on the side and all your work with entrepreneurship? How do you balance that?
I think initially I think the good thing was this. When I was in high school, I did a lot of sports and worked and kind of had a kind of that life was already there, like doing all these different things. So that kind of really helped. But once I came to college, obviously the workload is different and you're learning new things. So when classes started and I was still working, I think I was struggling in the beginning, kind of just how do I keep the communication every day? Because I'm in classes some days from, for example, right now I'm working on Tuesday and Thursday. Sorry, I'm have classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So, but the thing is, just because I have classes doesn't mean like my team has class. So I have to make sure that I have all my communication open. So I'm always answering emails, like always texting or always slacking or whatever the form of communication that the team that I'm working with needs. Although like I'm not doing the work because they might need something from me that was done maybe yesterday, but they're working on it today. So it's a lot of balancing and keeping your communication open, even if you're like not available. And so for me, once classes started and I kind of got the flow of like just having them understand like my perspective of like, yeah, this is my workload for school. This is what I can do for work. This is how much I can handle this week. They were like very understanding of it. And they kind of encouraged me to kind of focus on classes more and saying like, it's okay. Like if you lower the communication, because at the end of the day, like I'm still a student, so they still understand that, which is awesome. But it's also cool to kind of apply what I am learning in school directly back to what I'm kind of doing sometimes. So a lot of the times I find myself like learning something in class and then a few months later it comes up in my work. I'm like, oh, okay, so this is why I learned this. So that's been really cool. It's more motivational to go to school and classes and just do them and actually pay attention when you're like kind of working parallel actually and kind of applying the same thing. So it's been fun.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's great. It sounds like definitely a bit of like time management and kind of just working through, but that's exactly what we kind of strive for here with, the entrepreneurship classes. And, I'm sure a lot of the viewers kind of know talking about innovation and then going to practice it in the real world is such, valuable insight there. But,
And
or go ahead.
yeah, I wanted to add that it's definitely like obviously being an entrepreneur obviously is very chaotic. So like you have a lot of things that you have to juggle and you're doing. And obviously like I don't consider myself an entrepreneur yet because I haven't really started my own business. But like I can kind of see what the other individuals are doing every day, like how many different things they have to kind of prioritize and get done, although like their specific role did not even specify for them to do that specific thing. So I kind of took that as inspiration from seeing it at work and seeing like, okay, if these individuals can do all of these things, why can I do these like small tasks or projects while I'm kind of continuing my education? So seeing that honestly every day really helped me kind of create like a mindset to like, all right, this is like totally normal. I can definitely do this. Like having like a belief in myself.
Hmm. Sure. Yeah. No. 100% to that as well. And you even sort of touched on it a little bit, but one of the last questions here I kind of had for you is maybe breaking down a little bit of advice that you would give to some of the viewers who are also college students about. We'll break it down into two categories, like maybe some general advice on entrepreneurship and innovation about how other students can go ahead and start pursuing what they really want to pursue, And then maybe also some more advice on how to balance, school and work, and also trying to pursue, whether it's your business or some kind of corporate innovation.
Yeah, I feel like I'm personally a very passionate person, so like I tend to go towards whatever like I love doing or I just love like learning about. And I found it easier to go for something that I'm fully passionate about than for an area that I maybe there's a lot of ideas that obviously everyone has, like, oh, I can improve this area or I could create a business here and here, but at the end of the day it's really hard to keep going when you don't love it, if you know what I mean. So so like for me, I would say if you put your passions first, everything else will follow. And I learned that like I put my photography and my creative side first and kind of went for the startup, and that led to everything now. And which I didn't plan on doing at all, but all I did was one thing, was like I just put my passion first and I was like, oh crap, like this is just working out now. So that's definitely one thing. Definitely go for like what you're passionate about. It's that easy to kind of create a business around it, because you would want to learn more, you would want to keep meeting people that are like you have similar interests. It just works out that way, for at least for me. And then with time management in school, I think it's like going back to communication. If you do find yourself kind of working part-time in an internship or a startup and kind of doing school at the same time, I would say like no matter what, I feel like you obviously they're gonna, if you have understanding bosses, they'll say to kind of lower it or lower your communication, or it's okay that if you're focusing on school. But if you do keep it open, I think it's easier for you too. You're kind of in the loop with what's happening with the team. You feel more engaged. So when you're getting back to the day that you're actually working, it's easier for you to kind of carry out your tasks because you already have that background information from everyone kind of emailing you and keeping you in the loop. And then I would say the third thing with being a student and kind of working at in innovation, sorry, being a student and kind of working at the same time is, I personally find it very, I personally find it very helpful to work at the same time, just because I know some students really struggle with like that one thing is like, oh, when am I ever going to use this? And I'm learning all this, when am I ever going to use it? And I feel like when you're working and you're kind of learning at the same time, you kind of connect the two and you start finding ways that you're actually going to use it, and you feel more inclined and passionate for school, just like you would for the project that you're actually working on. So yeah.
Yeah, I think those are all great points of advice there. Totally agree with the passion and following, what you do, and kind of things will start working out as you kind of pursue what you really want to work on. I think that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
So I think before, or I'll put out one other mention. I see we have one question in the chat here. If you guys have any other questions, we're gonna roll into Q&A, very shortly. So feel free to just keep dropping those in the chat box, and we'll start answering some. But for Maruf here, before we go into those questions, maybe is there anything else you wanted to mention about anything? I feel like we've covered a lot, but is there any other kind of final words you wanted to talk about, or other pieces of advice that you wanted to mention before we kind of dive into some Q&A?
Yeah, I would definitely say, like, going back to the passion thing, um, I think it's really important in general, just in life, to kind of go for what you're passionate about later, and like kind of figuring out what you love to do and then going for it. Because I'm finding that as someone that's like really young, you're kind of seeing the world with new eyes. So you just like, oh, I like this, I like this. It can get really crazy, right? So I feel like once you really like work for someone else that's kind of doing the startup and learn that way, I think it's better that way to sometimes, or before, sorry, it's better to work for someone first and learn and then kind of start your own thing, because then you're kind of learning from their mistakes and learning from everything that you're seeing happening day to day, and then you can apply it back to your idea and your passions, and it just happens that much easier. So that's all.
Gotcha. Yeah, again, great piece of advice.
Yeah,
So yeah, it looks like we do have one question in there so far, so we can at least start with that in the chat. But looks like Devin asks, what would you say is the most impactful part of your occupation?
um, I would say really working. I think working on a lot of the projects that helps with sustainability is really like my favorite thing. Like the other month we got some data, and we noticed that the app that we were working on for the climate change and kind of helping people transition into that lifestyle. Together, the entire community reduced 2 million metric tons of carbon offset. So like they offset 2 million, which is like an insane amount. And it kind of validate the idea that your single action can really lead to like a larger impact when you're like doing it as a community. And I think like that's like my favorite part of my job is kind of seeing how like it's kind of impacting people in the world in a positive way. So a lot of those projects is something that like I really enjoy working on. And yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And next up, it looks like from Brian here. How do you determine your passion?
I wish I could tell you that one, but I really feel like it's different for everyone. I don't know, like I'm a very curious person. So I like to kind of delve into anything and everything. And I feel like if I have an interest for it, I just try to learn as much as I want about it. And then if I still like it, I'll continue to learn. But what I notice is when I slowly start losing interest for it, I wasn't actually passionate about it. I just found it interesting and I wanted to learn it. And I wanted to like read about it and do things about it. So I guess Brian, like I would say, bro, like try as many things as possible and see what you continue doing. So for example, photography is something I still do and I barely do any of it for my job now, but I did before. But I continue to do that every day almost, to be honest. But that's something that like continued with me. So like I'm very passionate about the creative world and all that too. So anything that lasts long with you in your heart and you feel really inclined to keep doing it, I think that's what you're passionate about. Well, at least that's my definition. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way to explain it. I feel like that's kind of what you're looking for, just something that's sticking with you for a while, something you really can't get out of your head and keep thinking back to, and definitely some trial and error as well, kind of picking through things to see what makes sense. But it looks like next here from Shenna, we have, how would you say corporate innovation differs from being a solo entrepreneur? And do you think corporations limit the creativity side at all?
Um, so to answer the first part, just going back to feeling that safety net, I think corporate innovation, you feel more comfortable, I should say. That's like the biggest feeling. It's like you aren't as afraid to go for something because it's almost like, I don't want to say this, but it's like you're thinking like, oh, this is someone else kind of investing in me, and if I fail, there will be someone to actually like walk me through it and help me out. So you have all these different resources that are already available to you and you have the idea. Whereas when you're a solo entrepreneur, you're actually not having to build the resources, find the individuals, but like and you also have to kind of make your idea happen. So you're doing all the stuff that's already available to someone who would just go to our department and tell the idea, but you're doing everything that that person does not have to do. So it's actually taking you longer to kind of make your idea happen because of all the resources that we have that you don't, unfortunately. And then, do you think corporations limit the creativity side? Um, to an extent, but I don't think my specific team is like that. Like I said, like we're very much like misfits, and it's kind of cool to kind of having a different background and all coming together to create something. And I think we never, for my team at least, like we don't try to limit creativity because I feel like when we're all kind of thinking weird, the coolest things happen. So no, yeah.
Perfect. And then looks like from Sarah here, do you ever come across coworkers that invalidate you for being younger? I guess that's actually a decent question for where kind of we're all at in terms of, how old are the people on your team? Like, are you the youngest one, or are there others, in college?
Dude, I'll be completely honest. I feel so stupid sometimes sitting in the room because they're so smart. There's like people with like four MBAs from Harvard, and then like there's a lady sitting across from me from NASA, and I'm just like, and sometimes just sitting there like, what am I doing? But the thing is, they all take me seriously, which is awesome, and like they know I don't know everything, and honestly, some of you have probably taken more college classes than I have. Period. Like I'm only getting to the start of my junior year now, so I've only finished my freshman year and my sophomore year. So sometimes, like, yes, I personally feel like I'm not like as in like I shouldn't be in the room, but like do they ever make me feel like that? No. They try to make me feel as comfortable as possible, and yeah, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's great all around, man. I mean, that's awesome. You get to work with all those kinds of people.
Yeah.
And let's see, another question on acquiring the startups and ideation sessions and Kickstarter. Uh, it sounds like you sort of touched on that one a little bit in terms of kind of things come from internally, is
Yeah.
what it sounded like before. I don't know if
Yeah.
there's
So
anything to add.
my group, so Exelon actually has two groups. One, so I work for the group that kind of works on the ideas and builds them from the ground up. And then there's a separate team. I don't work for them, but they work with another company called Constellation, and that's a company we own. And they have a group called Constellation Venture, and they actually acquire different startups that we think are potentially valuable to the company. But I have no experience in that, unfortunately, Shanna. Yeah.
Gotcha. And then uh, I think you know Chris. Maybe just throwing in a funny thing there about some sales experience. But
I actually worked with Chris at Best Buy for 2 years when I was younger.
oh, okay, yeah. I know. I knew you guys knew each other. I wasn't sure that was the exact connection, but I got you. That's funny then.
Chris, it helped a lot, bro. It helped me. I think Best Buy, how it helped me is I was around so many different individuals every day, like talking to strangers. It really helped me, I guess, get better at public speaking. Also, uh, just being comfortable around talking to and meeting to different people and people that are older or younger in general. Because sometimes, like you might feel nervous or anxious, like, oh, this person has these credentials or they're this age, and how can I how do you present yourself? But I think working at Best Buy and kind of speaking to all those different people from what we worked there since like 10th grade. So that really helped a lot.
Right. Yeah, there you go. And that's a great connection. And then from Jessica, it looks like we have how do you continue to learn about entrepreneurial ideas and resources if your postgraduate job is not at a startup?
How do you learn? I personally look up a lot of case studies, if that helps. But like I read a lot of researches or a lot of studies by McKinsey. I think JP has them out all the time. Deloitte has them all the time. So you can kind of see you can kind of get the initial information from a lot of these big consulting companies and yeah, like research firms. That's how I usually do it. But to be honest, like I don't know what the how you would actually.
Yeah, there's especially being, all of us essentially from Philly here, there's plenty of resources within the city, whether it's events or things like that, that can definitely keep your mind going on that topic, sort of post grad if it's not, within a startup world. And
I think
then
also surrounding yourself with the right people that are kind of doing it. Maybe you're not doing it, but a few of your friends that are entrepreneurs that are kind of going for their idea, just like surrounding yourself with them may even get you kind of flowing and going about your idea. That helps too.
sure. Yeah, I think definitely bouncing ideas off of, each other peers, definitely a great opportunity as well. And then from John, this is a great question actually. If you could kind of talk about how these ideation sessions unfold, sort of like, is there a leader, some kind of agenda?
Yeah, so there's an ideation session that's happening right now. It started at 12:30. I'm sitting out on it for this, but it's all good. But yeah, so how it works is there's obviously a moderator, and he kind of says like, okay, these are the specific opportunity areas we want to focus on today. So we always kind of label like, okay, this one's gonna be for sustainable communities. This is gonna be for like water, or this is gonna be for this. And then after we kind of put the topic, everyone kind of starts throwing ideas on the board, like literally like an ideation session. Everyone has a marker, or if I'm like remote, I'll do it on the chat, and then someone collects them, and then that's just like seed one. Like, it's just like stage, not seed one, sorry, stage one of it, just collecting all the ideas that the group had. And the second stage is where we start to knock them down based on evidence. So like whoever had the idea would then go and kind of research their ideas and figure out if this is actually going to work, or if this or if it's not going to work, and then kind of provide evidence of like why he decided to take the idea off, and then like proceed from there. And then obviously by the third stage, you kind of nailed like one single idea that you kind of want to go for. That's where like that small investment comes in and goes into the pilot stage. So hope that helped you better understand it.
Perfect. And so maybe we'll just kind of end with these two questions here. Since we're running a little low on time, and it sounds like you might have to run as well. But we'll do these last two. Do you see yourself continuing to work for Exelon after college?
I think I think I do. If I so why it's hard is right now I'm obviously like an intern basically, or like a co-op that's kind of working. So after college, if there is like a full-time position open in my department, then yeah, for sure, like I would love to join because I feel like it's a really good way of just getting experience like in the startup world and kind of meeting the correct people. So from that standpoint, yeah, I wouldn't mind working for them. But if I didn't get the opportunity, honestly, like I wouldn't mind because I feel like after coming out with so much experience and so many things that I learned from them, I can really apply it at any innovation or any innovation company or department. So I wouldn't mind working for someone else either if it was a similar structure in the team.
Awesome. And then lastly here, Michael's asking about any tips for gathering capital or finance for a startup as a young entrepreneur.
Hey man, I go to my family first. So so I personally feel like this is advice that my grandpa gave me. And so my family was kind of like made of entrepreneurs. So like I remember when my grandpa first started his business, it was I think it was like a clothing store. His initial like round of, I guess, funding, if you call a clothing store a startup, was all came from people who basically believed in him. So his friends, his family. I feel like that's the easiest place to start. And then obviously, if you have relationship externally, or like if you have like a friend who has a connection at a venture firm or knows someone, I think it's easier to go in like that than just going like just going in without just blind into like a venture firm and trying to get money. If you have like a connection beforehand, or try to make that connection beforehand before you do. That was my best advice.
Perfect. Well, awesome. We've looks like we've answered pretty much everything here in the chat, and we're right on time. So, well, I think we can kind of close it out here. Maruf, thank you so much for joining us today. I think this was an awesome session, answered a lot of questions, and definitely gave us some really good insight on, you know, who you are, corporate innovation, and entrepreneurship as a whole. So, thank you again.
No, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
I know.